Now, Mr. Dells, was Lamar Jackson disappointing in the AFC Championship game?
Absolutely. Lamar was disappointing. The whole team outside, I should say the whole offense was disappointing. Todd Monken, from top to bottom, this was an ass whooping. You don't always see a one touchdown game and think ass whooping, but this 17-10 game to me felt like an ass whooping.
I'm with you.
You know, it started from the beginning where the Chiefs go first drive, second drive, down the field, touchdown, and we're sitting here thinking, oh shit, because the Ravens scored a touchdown between two. We're thinking this is going to go back and forth all game long. And the Ravens even got their touchdown kind of on a broken play from Lamar. It was a beautiful throw to Zay Flowers, but it felt like once the Chiefs went touchdown to start the game, the Ravens kind of held their breath.
Yeah.
And they got tight. And they're like, we got the big boy Chiefs on the other side. We got Mahomes on the other side. And instead of treating him as an equal, it almost felt like they were treating the Chiefs and Mahomes like this god that we have to catch up to. That every single play has to be a big chunk play. Yeah. Every play they have to get 20 yards or else it's a failure. In the first half, they ran the ball to running backs 4 times. I don't know how you see that game against the Bills last week, Chiefs versus Bills, where Buffalo runs for nearly 200 yards. Don't get me wrong, Josh Allen got a decent portion of that. James Cook was getting his too. Yeah. I'm not sure how you could go into this game, and the game plan is to pass the ball. Because the game plan, it was obvious from snap one, it is to pass the ball. Coming into this game, by far and away the biggest weakness for the Baltimore Ravens. It's been their biggest weakness all season long, but really hasn't come up just because how dominant they've been. It's been the wide receiver room. All season long, their biggest weakness and really only weakness has been the wide receiver room. And what's the biggest strength of the Chiefs outside Mahomes? It's their DBs. It's Trent McDuffie. It's Snead. It's Justin Reed. It's all these dudes who have been playing at a all-pro level for majority of the season and seem to be only elevating in the postseason. And for whatever reason, Todd Monken decided, our average wide receivers, we're going to beat you against your elite DBs. It wouldn't have been my game plan. It shouldn't have been the game plan. But that was the game plan the Ravens ended up going with. And that's why the score was what the score was. Like I mentioned when we were talking about the Chiefs, it was, 17-7 at one point, right? For the majority of the game, 17-7. They kicked the field goal in the fourth quarter. At no point did I feel like the Ravens were going to come back and win, especially after the Zay Flowers fumble. It felt like that was just the last chance they really had to gain some sort of momentum where they hit the big play down the field to Zay. He gets the taunting penalty. You're like, you finally do something right. Then you do something wrong. You get a nice catch to Zay. He makes something happen after the catch, and Snead makes a potentially game-saving, season-saving play at the 1-yard line. It goes into the end zone, and it's a touchback. It's a really hard pill to swallow for Baltimore because this felt like the year. We were talking about this coming into the playoffs where if there was any season the Baltimore Ravens were going to go to the Super Bowl, it was this year. In your own division, you have Joe Burrow go down. He was not himself really all season long outside of a month, but he doesn't play a majority of the season. Yep. You have a lot of kids in here. You have CJ Stroud who play in the second round, who's a rookie who's phenomenal, but he's a rookie in the playoffs going up against a top defense. And then you have the Chiefs, who offensively, it's the weakest we've seen the Chiefs in the Patrick Mahomes era. This felt like the legitimate, not only shot, but the best chance the Ravens had to go to the Super Bowl, and it was right in front of him. The defense gave them opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. They held Mahomes to 0 points, really for 3 quarters, right? The second quarter, they scored at the 9-minute drive, and they got the field goal at the end of the first half. But really for 3 quarters, this team absolutely shut down the Chiefs. And we were praising Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson for that Texans game, saying how well they adjusted in the second half. And they just couldn't do it in this game. You mentioned it coming into this game, which was a great point, how Spags disguises his blitzes a hell of a lot better than DeMeco Ryans does, and that was apparent.
Yep.
All game long, the Ravens were never comfortable. Lamar Jackson was never comfortable in the pocket. It never felt like they really knew where the pressure was coming from.
Yep.
He always felt just a little bit under panic, just a little bit stressed in the pocket, and was never comfortable. And then you have the two just back-breaking mistakes of the fumble in the first quarter and then the interception to triple coverage. And that was the game sealer where that was the end of it. But those 2 mistakes. And on the other side, the defense played their ass off. The only chance the Ravens had this game was Patrick Mahomes making a mistake, and Patrick Mahomes wasn't going to make a mistake. He's shown that throughout his career. Playoff time, he's just not going to have a back-breaking mistake that's going to end the game or potentially put the game in jeopardy for the Chiefs. So as a Lamar, truther, it sucks because this felt like all the progress he made from his rookie year to MVP to the second MVP to he's so much better now than he has been in the past, and now he gets the opportunity to really put himself into a class not of his own, but kind of sneaking into the top 10 quarterbacks of all time conversations with 2 MVPs, a potential Super Bowl. He's going to have all the records for rushing, and he couldn't do it. Oh. And he looked outmatched and outclassed. Lamar deserves blame, but it was entirely the Chiefs' defense overwhelming the Ravens' offense.
Now, I say this because, as you guys know, Lamar Jackson isn't one of my favorite players, but I respect Lamar Jackson. I believe they lost this game before it even started. The play calling, the play design, the game plan, where you drop back 82% of plays, you only run the ball 16 total times. To me, how is that humanly possible when outside of the defense being the main reason why you ended up beating the Houston Texans, the number 2 reason was because you ran the ball 42 times and you dominated the ground? How is it possible? Like Joel mentioned, you watched that game versus the Bills, and when we were talking, Riv, what did we say? Look at the way that the Bills just ran on the Chiefs. You're talking about a better rush offense. Nobody runs the ball more than the Baltimore Ravens going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. How do we know the game plan? We're just 4 guys that talk about sports, and then you go out there and you run 16 times? You have to know your quarterback. This isn't an indictment on Lamar Jackson's arm. He made some pretty nice throws yesterday. That throw to Zay Flowers, that was a beautiful play out of structure where he just makes magic happen, and he's able to score a touchdown. The other throw to Zay Flowers, where, of course, he ends up getting the taunting play, but that's a solid ball that Zay just has to go and make something else happen.
I don't want to cut you off, but it sucks that Zay Flowers had that moment because he was the only one who showed up.
He was the only player outside of Lamar Jackson that actually was exciting. And there's no slack on Mark Andrews, because I think Mark Andrews coming back from injury, you should have had some certain expectations for him. Isaiah Likely, who's been awesome, I think that he had a couple moments where he's the one that I look at. There was a couple calls that should have been called on not on him, but of course on the defenders, the holding late in game, the one where he did throw it into triple coverage. So I understand it wasn't a good decision, but I do think that he was interfered with before the ball even got there. I think that was just a bad decision by Lamar Jackson. So I'm going to say Isaiah Likely was also, I'm going to leave him out of this too, because Isaiah's been playing relatively great for the last few weeks with Mark Andrews being out. But there were moments where I would have liked Lamar Jackson to show me why you're a superstar. I know that he did have some plays here and there, but understand when you're sitting in that pocket, the play that he fumbled on early on in the game, where, of course, the Chiefs didn't end up scoring that next drive because defense was able to hold on 4th, he sat in that pocket for 5 seconds. 5 seconds in the NFL is a long-ass time. You're Lamar Jackson. I understand you're trying to let plays develop. That's one of my few knocks on Lamar in this game. You held on to the ball too long. You're Lamar Jackson. Take off. You have an attribute no other player has in the league. You are fast, you're strong, you're shifty, and you play the quarterback position. There's nobody that has that skill set. You had to utilize that against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that's why I'm pretty critical on Lamar today. But the defense, I mean, what can you say? I feel like I'm not blaming Lamar because you look at the game plan by the Chiefs defense, and I find myself giving them a ton of praise. They executed a beautiful game plan, and I just look at the lack of adjustments made by coaching by the Ravens and think, I'm not blaming Lamar because I feel like he left it all out there. Yeah, he made some mistakes, and yes, he's going to get some heat. You're the quarterback. You're one of the faces of the league. You made some mistakes too, but I say that where I'm consistent. If a quarterback is also having a relatively shaky game, but I don't agree with the game plan, I'm gonna make sure that I emphasize your game plan was not good. You have one of the best rush offenses in the league. Can argue it's number 1, and you fail to utilize it. It's irresponsible.
I think that's ridiculous. I think you got to put blame on Lamar. I think you can.
Oh, he definitely deserves.
I think you can walk in and say the game plan wasn't good. I think you can walk in and say the offense wasn't prepared. I think at the same time, you got to understand you're probably going to win your second MVP. And the fact that you are going to win your second MVP, I understand game plan is very important in the NFL. But like you mentioned, There was a multiple times where he held the ball too long in the pocket. There was multiple times where he could have made plays with his legs, which he is, like you mentioned, probably the best in NFL history at making plays with your legs. He could have done it. He didn't. There was moments in that game where, he let a couple balls get over him. Also, that the running back core was pretty weak. They got a couple guys that were injured. Gus Edwards was good, but outside of that, Zay Flowers did come to play. But outside Odell Beckham, outside of them 2-3 catches he had back to back, didn't see him much. Aguilar had a drop. Mark Andrews, that was his first game back, so I'm not going to really give him too much slack. He hasn't played in a minute. The fact that he was able to play in that game was impressive enough. That offense, man, it lacked any juice. It looked like it was figured out in the first quarter. There was no energy to it. They had a couple cool plays. Like Dell's mentioned, Zay Flowers was balling. Like I don't care about that penalty where he got taunted. I feel like if you're in the playoffs, you should taunt. I really believe that. Let him taunt. This shit makes
said that too. He said, let him taunt.
Yeah, let him taunt. This shit, and the play was fire. He had every right to do what he had to do. Go get it back, and Snead got it right back in blood. So what's the issue? And I feel like a couple discipline plays, that they had. You had the Clowney. I forgot what the call is.
Roughing the passer.
Roughing the passer. Like it was a lot of lack of discipline plays, a lot of bonehead decisions that this Ravens team made that looked like they were just inexperienced. They wasn't ready for the moment. And you hate that for a team that pretty much dominated the league this year. I think defensively, the first quarter didn't start off great, but quarters 2 to 4, they were pretty great. They had timely stops. They played good. They did everything they needed to do, but that offense, which is primarily the play caller and the quarterback, who is the MVP, you got to put some blame on him. And I feel like Lamar could have played better. I feel like we watched him, make plays with his legs all year. We watched him be a great pocket passer. And in this game, he just felt timid. He felt nervous to a degree, which, he doesn't have the greatest track record in the playoffs, but you would think he talked about this moment. This was probably the biggest moment of his career. This was the biggest game since the Ray Lewis days with the Baltimore Ravens. This is a home game in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. A moment where, like we mentioned, Joe Burrow was the only guy who was able to get past the torch. Allen had an opportunity before to beat the Chiefs. Defense failed him. Allen had an opportunity last week to beat the Chiefs. Defense failed him. Burrow beat him. Lamar had an opportunity.
Failed Josh Allen.
I mean, no, I lied. Defense hit him the first time. Offensively, they failed the second time. But even then, the defense got gashed. So low-key did. Your defense came to play, and your offense could not step up to the plate. Even the Chiefs' offense, whether Patrick Mahomes game managed or not, he didn't turn over the ball once. He played a fine game. He made big plays when he needed to. Same with Kelsey. Kelsey was on one early in the game. Rashee Rice had a couple good catches. MVS was big late in the game. They had timely plays when you needed to, and the Ravens offense just didn't show up.
It's hard to play hypotheticals with this game, but the Chiefs scored on the first 2 drives.
Yep.
I think after they scored on the first 2 drives, Mahomes went into kind of neutral mode and wasn't big play hunting. I think if the Ravens were scoring on offense and the Chiefs had to match them point by point, they would have scored more. I think they were definitely playing safe and with the lead for a majority of the game. Credit the Ravens defense, though. They played phenomenal. I do want to say, though, Roquan Smith got his ass kicked.
He did.
And it was personal. And that's why I say he should never ran his mouth about Mahomes.
He didn't.
He should have never ran his mouth.
The comments called you out on that. They said you were lying.
No, Kyle Van Noy, they called me out. That shit was a great Photoshop. This shit caught the fuck out of me. But Roquan Smith, he said that Mahomes, he puts his pants on like anybody else.
I don't got a problem with that.
Mahomes puts his pants on differently. That's a different type of
2 legs.
That's a different type of man.
Misery.
That's a different type of man right there.
Bro made up a narrative.
I'm angry. He made up some bulletin board material for Mahomes.
The offensive line definitely took it personal. If you saw the way they were finishing plays on Roquan Smith, they definitely took it personal. To this point, 2 weeks ago when we talked about Lamar Jackson being a 2-time MVP and maybe winning the Super Bowl, because this was the Ravens' best team. This was the best group of pass catchers. This was the best defense. This was the year. Talking about if he wins a Super Bowl, he puts himself into elite company. Well, now that he lost, he's the most underachieving 2-time MVP in NFL history as of right now. When you look at the MVPs that have won 2 MVPs or more,
I'll just say thank God, because Peyton Manning was facing similar allegations early in his career.
Right now, it's Steve Young, Kurt Warner, Joe Montana, Mahomes, Then players that have won 3 MVPs or more: Johnny Unitas, Brett Favre, Jim Brown, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning. Lamar Jackson has entered this list, and he has not won a Super Bowl yet. And there have been 2 instances where he's been favored and lost. In 2019 against the Titans went in and they beat their ass. And Lamar Jackson did not play a good game. And then against the Chiefs, they are favored to the point that it felt like people were just ruling out the Chiefs, that they had no chance to win this game.
Yep.
And Lamar Jackson didn't play well. He's now 2-4 in the playoffs. The 2 wins Lamar Jackson has in the playoffs, his defense has allowed 13 points and 10 points. The games that he's lost, his defense has allowed 23 points, 28 points, 17 points, and then 17 against the Chiefs, the game that we just saw. These losses that he's had, the defense has not been Swiss cheese outside of the one against Tennessee. Mm-hmm. His defense has showed up. And Lamar Jackson, to this point, has 9 total touchdowns in the playoffs, 7 turnovers, has a passer rating of 70, and is completing less than 60% of his passes. To this point, Lamar Jackson has not performed in the playoffs. The Texans game was nice. And this is why I don't trust teams that are dominant all year and that haven't been battle tested. Because the Ravens have been cruising by against better playoff teams, and we can credit them for that. But when they get in a game that's sloppy, that's a dogfight, it doesn't feel like they're as prepared as the other team. Todd Monken, the game plan was not great at all. They have ran the ball on average 31 times a game. This game, it was 16 total times, so half of that, and 8 of them came from Lamar Jackson, not on designed runs, but more so on scrambles. I think this loss by Lamar Jackson and the Ravens should make us appreciate other quarterbacks that much more that actually win in the playoffs, even when they have narratives on their name about being carried. I don't know. Maybe Joe Burrow comes to my mind. And, you know, the Ravens, the Ravens, man. This was their year because next year Joe Burrow's coming back. He said the return of the Jedi. And they're going to make some noise.
Joe Burrow and Lamar season, please, at the same time.
And Aaron Rodgers.
So we can see this actual division battle. I'm kind of ignoring that, but you know.
Let me ask you, who was better against the Chiefs, Lamar Jackson this year or Joe Burrow last year?
Joe Burrow.
I'll go Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't misremember that game. Joe Burrow wasn't not good.
Every single offensive lineman for Joe Burrow was out. He was playing with backups. Aren't his starters kind of backups? His starters suck too, but he was playing with guys that are worse than that.
Yo, that's one thing I'm also going to say against Lamar. The offensive line did not play that bad. It wasn't great.
It was all right.
It was not.
It was manageable.
Horrible.
It was manageable.
Again, on that fumble where people are saying Ronnie Stanley got cooked. Watch it back.
I don't think Ronnie Stanley had a good game at all.
He didn't have, again.
He should have ran.
He had 5 seconds holding on to the ball. Take off.
I think with Lamar Jackson, I still think he's a great elite quarterback in the NFL. There's no doubt about that.
Regular season merchant?
At this point, you can point to the numbers and say, you know, possibly. I still think he's a great player in the playoffs. This is the thing with the Ravens. They just ran into a genius on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo was confusing the hell out of their offense. It worried me coming into this matchup how they would handle pressure because in the first half, they looked like a junior varsity offense against DeMeco Ryans, and DeMeco Ryans was doing nothing to disguise his pressure. If you saw 5 or more at the line, they were sending heat, and they made it known. So in the second half, it was relatively easy to call out those looks because they knew what was coming. They knew what to prepare for. With Spags, he was toying with the Ravens. There were times when he was showing pressure, and it happened in the sequence of this game where 3 times in a row, Spags showed pressure and dropped back into cover 2. 3 straight times. So each time you're thinking you're seeing pressure, you have to adjust protections. Oh my God, there's so many secondaries. There's so many defenders in the back end that are covering these routes. Steve Spagnuolo was just doing a heck of a job confusing his offense. Lamar Jackson in this game, 3 turnover-worthy plays. The fumble, dropped interception, a red zone interception that he had. 20 dropbacks when blitz. That's 43.5% of the time. 8 for 18 against the blitz. Completed 44% of his passes for 125 yards and 1 touchdown. That 1 touchdown was the one where he broke out of a sack and threw it to Zay Flowers. That was a phenomenal play. But he had 16 dropbacks under pressure in this game. That's 34.8%. That's a manageable pocket. That's not a pocket that is one that you should fold completely under. Just for reference, Joe Burrow in the AFC Championship game in 2021 had 45% or more pressure on his dropbacks and still was able to win the game. And Lamar took 4 sacks on those pressures, a 25% pressure to sack ratio. And that's the difference between quarterbacks that can avoid negative plays in the playoffs. Mahomes, like Dale's mentioned, he's only taken 1 sack in the last couple playoff games.
2 in total.
2 total. Yeah. He avoids negative plays entirely. And when you get into these matchups, the interceptions matter, the fumbles matter, but most importantly, and I know people don't treat them as interceptions or fumbles, but sometimes sacks can be just as costly as interceptions and fumbles. There was a sack that Lamar Jackson took when the Ravens were in field goal range when Justin Reed came on a blitz, and he completely annihilated and steamrolled Justice Hill and sacked Lamar. That took the Ravens out of field goal range. That took points off the board. Yep. And that's a flaw that Lamar Jackson has to work on. He's a big game hunter. The reason why that Justin Reed sack happened was because Lamar was searching for the big play instead of getting the right play and just getting a couple more yards. The strip sack by Charles Omenihu, that happened because Lamar was big play hunting down the field. He was ready to take a shot, and then he got stripped from behind. These are things that, all season long, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. They've been working. But in the NFL, those split-second decisions sometimes can come back to haunt you. Lamar did not face a defense like this all season, and the first time they faced a defense like this, it showed. I agree they should have ran the ball more, but I think the Chiefs were also defending the run very well. On all their attempts, even though it was a minimal amount of attempts, the Ravens barely gained any yards. And I think the Chiefs were daring the Ravens to pass because they understood that you guys don't have the receiving talent that can match up with our secondary. And we trust our secondary on islands against your receivers. You look at the red zone interception. On that play, it's interesting because the players that were in there were a backup in Deion Bush, I believe his name was. Deion Bush, Justice Reed was one of the safeties there. They went into a down package, and a rookie named Chamari Connor. Deion Bush broke on that interception, and he intercepted Lamar. He read his eyes. And it just goes to show the trust that all these players have in Spagnuolo, where these players that on other teams probably don't make much of an impact, Spags has them playing an ultra-specific role to where they can execute at the highest level. And the perfect example of that was Drew Tranquill. Drew Tranquill with the Chiefs, they just have him spying the quarterback and going downhill and being a blitzer. And in that specific role, he is awesome. But with the Chargers, he wasn't that awesome because they was asking him to drop into coverage. They was asking him to do multiple things. But there are certain players that, you ask them to do something specifically, and they can execute that at a high level. And that's what the Chiefs have a lot of, and Spags has gotten the best out of them. They just ran into a better schemed team, and the Chiefs are just more disciplined. And I think the Ravens came into this game with much more emotion. They got a lot of stupid penalties by just being excessive. But yes, this was a disappointing game by Lamar Jackson. He has to play better in this moment. It's as simple as that.
1 touchdown. Unacceptable. Can't happen. Floating versus harassment. Just remember that, guys. Remember.
Honestly, I don't even think they gave the run game a chance because they had 4 running back runs in the first half. One was Gus Edwards, who got 15 yards. And then the other, there was 2 that was just like short yardage. It was like 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, whatever.
Zay Flowers had a couple of attempts.
It was tough to watch, man. Because the game was in reach the whole time. It's not like it's a 3-touchdown game in the third quarter. And honestly, I thought the second half, they were moving the ball, but they were just having, penalties and interceptions and all that type of shit. So they never really gave it a chance. And like I said to start my monologue, it just felt like once the Chiefs went down and scored touchdowns back-to-back, they felt like they were battling uphill when they didn't have to.
I felt like that when you're going up against the Kansas City Chiefs and you're playing from behind, automatically you feel like I'm climbing Mount Everest here, especially when this is the first time you're in this moment, the AFC Championship game, going up against the beast and Patrick Mahomes. You can't go down 2 scores. It's seemingly like you have a foot on your chest and you're fighting for your life. That's just the unfortunate truth. You have to get up early on Patrick Mahomes and make him the one to be aggressive.